So glad to have you on. A lot to get to. We'll see how much of it we can tackle today. Let's talk about specific FCC rules or regulations for what is put on TV in terms of defamation, incitement, or content that could lead to a suspension.
So there are FCC rules and regulations, as you would expect, that govern broadcast media and that reflect that certain types of speech, including defamation and incitement of violence, are considered low-value speech that receive less protection under the First Amendment. Here, however, it doesn't appear that the pressure that the FCC placed on private broadcasting agencies to remove Jimmy Kimmel from the air was premised on allegations that his monologue remarks were necessarily defamatory or risked inciting violence. The FCC is prohibited by law from censoring or interfering with free speech, but there is an infrequently used exception in which the FCC may revoke a broadcast network's license if it doesn't operate in the public interest or if it engages in news distortion. And this public interest exception empowers the FCC to revoke these network licenses and may in fact be the legal basis that the FCC was relying on when it threatened to take action against broadcasters who continued to air Kimmel. In fact, in recent months, the FCC had initiated an investigation against ABC under this narrow exception based on allegations of an anti-conservative bias in its content. And if the FCC's involvement in the removal of Jimmy Kimmel from the air was based on this exception, it would likely be vulnerable to a First Amendment challenge.
This is confusing to a degree, and I'll try to keep it simple, but you basically had ABC and Disney taking it from two sides. You had the FCC coming at them, and then you had Nexstar, which owns 32 ABC stations, and they had already said, we're not going to air Kimmel. And Nexstar, by the way, is in a bid right now seeking FCC approval to buy out the company that owns King 5, Tegna. And basically, it sounds like they had kind of forced ABC and NBC to go this route, along with the FCC coming after them. Do I have that right?
Yeah, it's complicated, but what I think is most important for this conversation is that the First Amendment has been interpreted by the Supreme Court to prohibit government coerced censorship that is designed to punish speech. Government officials are free to criticize particular viewpoints, they can try to persuade others, but they can't use state power to punish or suppress unpopular speech. And that includes forcing corporations to punish speech on their behalf. This is something that actually the Supreme Court reaffirmed as recently as 2023 in a unanimous decision in a case called NRA v. Vullo, in which the Supreme Court reiterated that viewpoint discrimination is uniquely harmful to a free and a democratic society, and that is no less harmful when it's done by a corporation on the behalf of the government. And yet that appears to be precisely what happened here with the cancellation of Jimmy Kimmel's show.
I didn't mean to steer it too far out. I was trying to give viewers a little bit of background of the pressure the ABC's under as far as freedom of speech goes. I mean, if you boil it down, do you think, in your opinion, that Kimmel or his producers can argue that their suspension or cancellation was a violation of free speech?
I think they can. They very may well be. I think it is noticeable that the indefinite suspension of Jimmy Kimmel was made within hours after the chair of the Federal Communications Commission threatened to revoke the broadcasting licenses of any stations that continued to air him. And that also suggested that this multi-billion-dollar merger agreement involving one of the largest owners of ABC affiliates and which required approval by the FCC might be in jeopardy if these broadcasting networks didn't take specific action. That certainly seems like very heavy-handed government coercion that had very real implications and an effect on Jimmy Kimmel's ability to express himself.
Is there a way that he could have that fight, but also simultaneously be opening himself up for a defamation suit, angering those people who back Charlie Kirk?
I would say that mischaracterizing facts or making comments that some individuals or public figures take issue with, it doesn't amount to defamation. The First Amendment generally prohibits the government from censoring even false or misleading speech. And the bar for establishing defamation under the Supreme Court's seminal case of New York Times v. Sullivan is quite high, especially when it involves public figures. But the fact that the law is on Jimmy Kimmel's side doesn't necessarily mean he isn't vulnerable to a questionable defamation lawsuit. President Trump has frequently leveraged defamation suits or the threat of filing a defamation suit to discourage the media from publishing content that is critical of him or that he disagrees with. Just this week, we saw that with President Trump having filed a $15 billion defamation lawsuit against the New York Times based on a series of articles they published questioning his success. And so it's not inconceivable that the president or an ally of the president may attempt the same strategy here and go after Kimmel for civil damages.
We will all watch and see how it plays out. Erin Carr with Seattle U, thank you so much. Appreciate it.